name's Vince Davis. I'm the Extension Weed Science Specialist for annual crops, corn and soybeans, small grains. And we started this collaborative research to look at the improvements of 80 plus years of soybean genetic and its interaction to agronomic factors. So the aspect that we looked at that we're going to talk about today is the impact of seeding rate. Seed cost has been going up, rate recommendations have been going down. But when we talk about the economics and how far the economics are driving our populations, it raises all sorts of interesting questions about weed control and where we want to be in terms of developing canopy and weed management. In total of this project, we looked at 116 cultivars that were roughly half of those maturity group 2 and the other half maturity group 3 that were pretty much evenly released from the 1920s up until the 2000s. And what we did is we had all these cultivars. They were planted 2 years over all 4 of these locations in the states, and we seeded them at either 180,000 seeds per acre or 60,000 seeds per acre. So we were comparing a high seeding rate with what I would say is a real low seeding rate. What I have here are the data for all 116 of these cultivars. And one of the things we found, in fact, is yes, the cultivars have gotten shorter over time. And in all the studies we did at all the years, yield has continued to increase. But yield is increasing under both the high seeding rate and the low seeding rate environment. What was interesting is we looked at the increase now in the genetic potential of individual plants. This graph here shows yield on a per plant basis, not on an area basis. So the bottom line with the solid circles is yield per plant under the high seeding rate, and the top line is yield per plant under the low seeding rate. To understand this further, our students broke this down in terms of where this yield on a per plant basis came from in terms of main stems or branches over time. This graph here shows yield on a per plant basis that came from the main stems. The linear regression turned out to be not different and exactly the same. And in fact, if you go back here and you kind of look, we used to have a lot more cultivars with a lot more emphasis of the production of the pods on these main stems, taller plants, and more production on the main stems. Now the ability to branch has always been in our genetic cultivars, but in a lot of these older cultivars, even though they do branch, what you find are the branches tend to be a lot weaker, not very many pods on the branches, and may not contribute all that much. As we get to the newer cultivars, a lot stronger branches, a lot more branching, and a lot more pods on these branches as we get to newer genetics. The ability to produce more and more on that main stem has not changed, even under a low seeding rate environment. When we look at the branches, again, the high seeding rate environment is the dark circles down here at the bottom, completely flat. There's been no improvement over time under a higher seeding rate. There's been no improvement over time at producing more yield on branches. Where the ability to produce on branches under the low seeding rate increased at 0.07 grams per plant over time, so we still have higher yields under full canopies today, and we do have higher yield today than we used to have, but the penalty for low densities has been drastically reduced. So how does this tie to weed control? Well, first off, we continue to talk about driving populations lower and lower in soybean, and in a lot of cases we're going away from drills or controlled spills, as I like to say, to planter units, because that seed is so expensive. You want to put every seed now in an optimal place to germinate and make a productive plant. As we drive those things down, how does it change a lot of our other agronomic recommendations, including what we should be doing for weed control? So I'll start to bring this together a little bit. One of the things we've spent a lot of time talking about over the last few years is using more residual herbicides in the system, particularly from a resistance management standpoint. And the biggest reason for that is we talk about wanting to get more modes of action out there, better herbicide rotation to slow the development of glyphosate resistance. The competition early in the season starts to make some different cues to the plant in terms of whether it's going to branch or not. So the question is, how much might weed competition affect this ability to branch? If we look at some of these newer genetics that have these nice strong branches that come from low in the plant, and if it affects these strong branches, how much does it affect canopy development? One of the pushback things we would always get, and still get from a lot of people, we'd say, well, we can seed a lot fewer seeds today and have a lot fewer soybean plants out there. Of course, the first thing is that's usually, those recommendations are usually generated under weed-free environments. So a lot of growers would say, but I need those extra plants out there to help me with weed control. That was certainly a lot of our education in the 80s when we were using a drill. We need those extra plants out there to get to a quicker canopy. And that's still important today, because we'd say, well, that is cultural weed control. So if we don't want to just preach about additional herbicide control to get us out of herbicide resistance issues, we need to consider what's important about recommending using other cultural control influences in the system. We're up there talking about the importance of using a residual herbicide. It seems like all we're talking about is recommending more chemical control in the system to get us out of herbicide resistance issues. And what I'm showing here is canopy effects. So what is on here, the three columns, are three seeding rates seeded at 60,000, 120,000, and 190,000 seeds per acre. The images across the top are where we used an effective pre-emergence herbicide, and the images on the bottom are where we relied on post-emergence glyphosate. What you see across the top is the pre's, across the bottom are the post only. And you can see at 6 weeks after planting, or 1 week after the post-glyphosate application, we had a difference of 23% canopy development to 41% canopy development where we used the pre. At 120, the difference was 43 to 55, and at 190, the difference was 57 to 68. So we're already developing canopy a lot faster where we didn't have that little bit of early season weed competition. So at 8 weeks, 3 weeks after post, at 60,000 seeding rate, our difference was 54% canopy development to 89% canopy development. At 120, the difference is 81 to 92. So yeah, those additional plants here are pretty important. At 190, the difference is 90 to 95. At seeding densities that you would have been planting not long ago, this is what you would have wanted to see out there 3 weeks after you sprayed your post-glyphosate, right? You wanted to see a good canopy like this, not 54% here. 60,000 where we used a pre at 8 weeks was equivalent to 190,000 where we didn't, in terms of canopy development. So you're not just getting chemical control here, but you're getting an important element of canopy development by using that residual herbicide. The residual herbicide here was really effectively, in terms of providing the cultural control benefit of additional canopy suppression for later on, equivalent to 130,000 seeds. That's almost a full bag.